Call me crazy if you want.
Susie, I don't want to call you crazy. I don't feel like that's a nice thing to say, especially when I've had really weird things that could be considered crazy happen to me. For instance, in the year 2000, I was a single mother. I had a little 3-year-old daughter, and we had moved into our very own first little home. And we had strange occurrences like start happening. Every cabinet in the kitchen would be opened. I would go in there, they'd all be opened. There'd be a strange puddle in the middle of the floor. Nothing was leaking, nothing had fallen, nothing had dripped. It was the weirdest thing. So one day I'm sitting down on the couch and I'm facing like a sliding glass door was over to my left hand side, and you could see the reflection of the whole entire hallway that was, kind of behind me. And I was sitting there facing the sliding glass door, and I see a reflection, and it looks like a little boy, preteen, had a big baggy, like a shirt that was too big for him, and overalls that were tight at the bottom, which I found super weird, and a shaved head. Now, let me just say, this image stayed stuck in my brain, like permanently. And I was freaking out. My heart's like thumping out of my chest. And as I'm like freaking out, my daughter burst out of her bedroom, which was right there in the hallway, scares the crap out of me. And she's like, Mom. She's super excited. And she's like, my sister, she's coming. She's coming. She's finally coming. And I was like, what? I was like, oh, okay. I'm like trying to soothe her and calm her down, and super weird because she always slept throughout the night. Fast forward a couple of weeks go by. I don't think it was even a month, but a couple of weeks go by, and I find out that I'm pregnant. I end up having my daughter, Pumpkin. She was adorable, and she, out of nowhere, when she was teeny tiny, she goes, I used to come and mess with you and my sister. I used to come and open up all the cabinets to scare you. Super weird. Like, I don't think I had ever told the story at that point. And she was teeny tiny. Most kids end up forgetting about things like that, but not her. She ended up holding true to that story. I think she was like 17. I was just like, I'm telling you, it was me. I used to come haunt you. Like, laughing about it. I'm like, stop joking around like that. Like, that scares me. Oh, and by the way, when I got pregnant with her, all the weird stuff completely stopped. Like, it just completely stopped. And anyway, fast forward to January 2019, and I'm packing up all my stuff. She and I were moving because my husband and I were getting married. And I had this thing with, like, I don't like things around my neck. I don't like necklaces, anything too tight, turtlenecks, nothing around my neck, right? And she had this scarf that she had been gifted, which I could not explain why, but I despised this scarf. Completely irrational, like loathing for this scarf. Anyway, I thought she had gotten rid of it. I was like super excited about it. I do not like that light. And we had kind of ran out of time, like, to pack everything. I'm like, it's getting late. I'm tired. Let's go grab some pizza and we'll come back and finish. And she was kind of sad that we were moving, and I was trying to be understanding. I'm like, of course, she's like, can I just stay here? And I was like, sure, honey, we'll just grab you some pizza. And we go eat. I come back, and I have this habit of taking off my clothes and changing into my pajamas. Anytime that I'm home, I'm wearing pajamas. So I go into the bathroom where I had left my pants, and I kind of see her out of my peripheral vision. Like, I saw that she was in the bathroom, and I'm like, honey, have you seen my pants? And I look over, and she's like standing on we had like a garden tub, and it looked like she was standing on the garden tub. And I'm like, honey, you're scaring me. And she wasn't moving, and I walked around, and I saw her face, and I could see she had that scarf that I hated. She had unalived herself, and of course I freak out, and I go to like grab her, and I looked around, and every cabinet in the bathroom was open because we had been packing. And when I went to go grab her, I stepped in a puddle of water, and that just freaked me out. I was like, because I knew that she had passed because there was a puddle of water on the ground. Fast forward to after her funeral, after everything, after I had moved, I was going through the post, and like the things, the really sweet things that her friends had made and posted about her. And one of the pictures, she was wearing the outfit that she had passed in. And it was a black t-shirt that was too big for her. She had shaved her head, and she was wearing overalls that were fitted at the bottom. Like, it was her. Like, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it was her that I had seen. It was her that I had seen in the hallway all those years ago. I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means, and I have racked my brain. Like, I've heard the theory of, time is a big circle, whatever. I don't know what it means. But yeah. But after that, I can't call anyone crazy. But I also hate store-bought pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie, you unhinged banshee. So in June of 2020, my husband and I got that first round of COVID that was like really, really bad before anybody had built up any resistance. And we were laid up on the couch for like a month and a half, just with the fatigue and the fever and just the whole shindig. But I was also super nauseous, and I would get nauseous like every 2 to 3 hours. And they couldn't tell me why I was getting nauseous or why I would get this like menthol smell in my nose. They were like, oh, it must just be COVID nausea. This is just another symptom. And I was like, okay, fine. And so I just deal with this nausea that happens, and it lasts for like a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And then it starts kind of going away. But then I realized that we started to gain weight just sitting on the couch for 2 months. A lot of weight. So I was like, okay, I need to go on the keto diet because this is just too much. I need to start losing the weight. So I do keto, and I was only taking like 1,200 calories a day, and I lost like 30 pounds, but now I can't poop. And I'm like, this is really uncomfortable. Like, it goes on for about a month of me like barely pooping, and I'm like, okay, this is bad. So I go see a doctor, Dr. Tomas Rios, Rios Healthcare off of Kirby Drive in Houston. And I go in, and he's like, okay, I'm going to prescribe you a laxative. Call me in a week. Let me know how it goes. And I'm like, okay, cool. So a week goes by. Nothing happens. And so I call him again. I make another appointment. I go see him. And he's like, okay, we need to do an x-ray of your intestines. So he has me take a pregnancy test. It comes back negative. And then I go in. He does the x-ray. I don't see the x-ray, but he's like, okay, you have a calcified stool in your large intestine. So you need to take mineral oil and Metamucil and do enemas and like all the fun stuff. I had a whole pharmacy just for pooping in my cupboard at this point, and nothing is helping. The only thing that's helping me poop is Jack in the Box. So I can't even do the keto diet anymore because like the only weight to lose is what's in my intestines. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying, it's not working. I was having this like weird movement in my stomach, and I videoed it and I showed him, and he was like, oh, it's just your intestines contracting, trying to push this stool out. So you just need to keep lubing it up essentially with the mineral oil and all the other stuff. Peachy. So I'm dealing with this, and it's getting even worse. Like everything is just backing up behind it because I can't poop. And so it's around Thanksgiving, and it sucks because I love Thanksgiving, but I'm not able to eat anything that I want to eat. And I even go to 2 different Thanksgivings, and it's just excruciating because there's nothing that I can eat that I want to eat. So it's Monday after Thanksgiving, and I wake up with like the worst period cramps. And side note, so I have PCOS. The last period that I had was in December 2019. So, and this is just common for me that I go a very long time without having any period cramps or symptoms or anything. So, I wake up and I'm having these terrible period cramps, and I even like go in the shower and I'm trying to put warm water on my uterus to like help it go along and not be as painful, and it's not working. I like sprained my pinky in the shower punching the wall because it's terrible, and I'm like, so now I have 11 months of uterine lining that's just waiting to shed itself out of my body. It's terrible. So my husband feels really bad, and he's like, do you want me to take you to Bentob? And I'm like, no, it's fine. I'm a strong woman. I'll sleep it off. It'll be fine. But then about 4:30 in the morning, I'm like, okay, this isn't good. I do need you to take me to the ER. So we're driving to the ER, and we get there, and the ER nurse is like, okay, are you pregnant? Because I looked pregnant. I couldn't poop. I had this huge, but it was like at the top of my stomach right there. It was like where he said the large intestine was. And so I got really mad. I was like, I'm not pregnant. I just can't take a shit. And she was like, okay, well, then why are you here? And I was like, well, I think I have a ruptured cyst on my ovaries because I have PCOS. And she's like, okay, we'll wheel you back, but your husband can't come in because of COVID restrictions. So he goes to work because he can't just like sit at home. He's worried. So he's like, he needs to get his mind off of it. So they wheel me back, and they give me something for the pain, and it's not really working. And I tell them, and they're like, okay, we'll give you some morphine. Morphine did the trick. And they're wheeling me in to go do ultrasound on my ovaries, and I'm sitting in the wheelchair high on morphine. And I texted my husband. I was like, this stuff is great. Like, I don't know why I'd see why people get addicted to it. And my period starts, and I'm like, oh, Courtney, like, this is the most expensive ER bill, all just because you forgot what period cramps are like. So I'm like, okay, fine, like, I'm already here, like, let's just go in and double check and make sure that this is just my period starting, that's what this pain is. And they wheel me into the ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech is, like, talking to me, and he's all friendly and chatty, and then he starts doing the ultrasound, and he gets really quiet, and he just walks out of the room. And I was like, I didn't really notice, because, again, I'm high on morphine, but these 2 ladies come and help me back into my wheelchair, which they weren't doing before. And I remember being like, wow, Bentob gets a bad rap. If you know Bentob in Houston, I was like, but the service here is great. I don't know what they're talking about. So I'm like in a good mood now, barely remembering that I can't poop. And they wheel me back into the room, and the nurse is this male Nigerian nurse. He's got this thick accent, and he's like, I need you to go pee in this cup. And I was like, oh, he probably thinks I'm high, but it's the morphine. But I go pee in the cup. I'm like, they're just going to do a drug test. And I go back into the room, and he's, doing the test. And he turns around, he's like, you are with company. And I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you are with company, you are with company. And he just keeps saying it over and over as if it's explaining anything. And I keep asking him, like, okay, and like, what does that mean? And then they start hooking me up to all of this stuff. And this other lady's in here, and she's like hooking me up. She's on this side. And he's like, you are with child. What? And I just in disbelief, and I look over at her, and she's hooking me up. She's like, I'm hooking you up to a heartbeat monitor right now. And then she shows me on the screen, she's like, this is the ultrasound. She's like, this is your child. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then another doctor walks in, and he's like, yeah, your water already broke. You're in active labor. We couldn't stop it if we wanted to. So I just keep my response. I'm like, no, no, no. And I say it like 60 times over and over, as if just saying no, they're going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, you're not pregnant. Never mind. And then I'm waiting for like Ashton Kutcher to come around the corner and be like, just kidding. And then I can sue Ben Todd for like millions of dollars for the worst prank ever. None of that happens. I am in active labor. I have to call my husband and tell him I'm pregnant, and I call him and I'm sobbing into the phone. He thinks I'm dying just because of the way that I'm on the phone. He can't understand anything I'm saying. He dropped me off with a ruptured cyst. That's all he knows. Finally, I get it out to him. I'm like, I'm pregnant. And he goes, are you serious? It's like, yeah. So he rushes over to the hospital. They start hooking me up to all this stuff. I tell him, I'm terrified to tell anyone that I'm pregnant, because I'm like, how does this happen? So I call his sister, and she was super excited for me. And so I was like, okay, I think I can do this. So while I'm in 26 hours of labor, he's on both phones. He's texting everybody, telling everybody that, guess what? I'm pregnant. And then 26 hours later, I gave birth to this little shit.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why.
Susie, I can't take it. You're an animal. I have a story. It's not quite as crazy as store-bought pesto, but in 2010, my wife and I got married. She was 18, I was 21. We had decided to save ourselves for each other for our wedding night. Be old school traditional. It's been amazing. But we dated for 6 months and got married January 2nd. And the day of the wedding, I had spent the night at my sister's on her air mattress on the floor because her house was really close to the venue. And during the night, the air mattress had deflated, so I was literally just sleeping on the ground. Well, I woke up and I was just in crazy back pain, but whatever. It's the day I'm getting married. It's all good. We go. Ceremony was wonderful. Pictures beautiful. It was really cold outside because, again, January in Montana, so there was snow everywhere, but it was beautiful. And then we had the reception later on in the day. Again, perfect. And later that night, we decided to go to the hotel to start our honeymoon. And I had to rent a car because my Saturn POS, I didn't trust to go very far at all. And she wasn't even old enough to rent a car. So we left the reception and got to the hotel room. And we go to the room and start doing what people do. And all day, my back had been killing me, but I had just been attributing it to sleeping on the floor. But in the hotel room, it was bad. Like, if that was bad enough to get in the way of something I'd waited 21 years for, it was bad. So I decided to go down to the car and get some ibuprofen. And by the time I got to the car, I was like shaking because it was so painful. Well, I take the pills, go back up to the room, and I'm physically, literally crawling into the hotel room because I was in so much pain. I go over to the toilet and instantly start throwing up. My wife, meanwhile, is not sure what the heck is going on. So she calls the hospital, and they're like, oh, you can put ice on it or heat on it or just come in. And so finally, after just an incredible amount of pain, we go ahead and go into the ER. And I was seen by this 95-year-old ER doctor who pulled me into this really cold exam room. And my wife's like, I want to come too. I'm like, really? Like, she had never even seen a full-grown man without his clothes on. So here I am undressing, and I look over at her and I just say, it's really cold in here. And later she tells me she didn't understand what I meant, but now she gets what I meant. But he examines me, as awesome as that experience was. Comes back and says, congratulations, you are passing a kidney stone. So on the night of all nights, it just proves that God has a sense of humor. Anyway, he's like, don't go to Canada, because that's what our plans were, is to road trip into Canada, go back to Bozeman, Montana, and just let the thing pass. Well, my wife had lost her passport. We had to expedite that. We had to change our reservation several times. Her mom had made her dress. It was so many things that had already kind of like built up to this point. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's just go buy like 3 or 4 gallon jugs of water, and I'll just chug them and pass the thing. Side note, I did pass it the next day. But we went up to Canada, and we went to the West Edmonton Mall, where they have beautiful like themed rooms. They've got like a monster truck room that has a literal monster truck in the bedroom, and then the bed of the mattresses in the bed of the monster truck. We chose the Arabian Nights and then the newlywed bed package, whatever, and had a great time. They had a hot tub in the room. We were dumb kids and put too much bubble bath in the hot tub, and then we couldn't find the on-off button for the jets, and so it overflowed. And so here we are, two idiot kids scooping out these huge bubbles from bubble bath out the window of this beautiful hotel. Let's see what else happened. Our car broke down the next night on the way home, or no, it was a couple days later. On the way home, it was like 20 degrees Fahrenheit below zero, and our brand new Chevy Impala breaks down. We had to push it off on the side of the road. We called the car rental place, and they said that there was two enterprises in the small town of Red Deer, Canada, but they were closing in like 10 minutes, and so they gave us the phone number to the one. They said one has no vehicles, but the other has one vehicle left, so you need to get there as soon as you can. So we hailed a cab, and they gave us the address, and so we jetted over there, got there in like 3 minutes to spare, just to find out that was the enterprise that did not have any vehicles. It was the other one across town. So we called them and said, please don't close, we're on our way. We threw all of our stuff back in the cab and jetted across town and made it there in time. All they had was a PT Cruiser that was in kilometers, but we didn't care. Yeah, it was a honeymoon from hell, but we had such a great time, and here we are 14 years later, and we look back and laugh. I mean, the wedding was crazy. The marriage has been a piece of cake, but the honeymoon was the thing that was the real test. And I know it's not as crazy as store-bought pesto, Susie, but it's still a pretty crazy story.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Store-bought pesto, wild. I also don't like store-bought pesto. I don't think it tastes right, but I got a doozy for you. So it was probably about 2001, 2002. I was about 4 or 5, and it was 4th of July weekend. I only remember that because my uncle had just come back from one of the southern states with a bunch of fireworks that are not allowed in this state, or were not back then. And all the adults are drinking pretty heavily. The kids are running around with sparklers, just some like real safe behavior. My uncle is talking to my cousin, who is probably like 8 years older than me, at least. And he's got this Vietnam helmet, and he goes, you know, this helmet got me through a lot of things. It's bulletproof. And my cousin's just all wide-eyed, and he goes, wow, really? And he goes, yeah. Why don't you go put it on and go walk around in the woods, and we'll pew-pew at you. And he goes, okay. And he puts the helmet on, and he goes just beyond the tree line and starts pacing back and forth. And I want to say that's where the story ends, that people are just kind of like laughing at him for being goofy. But no. No, it does not. He's walking back and forth, and one family member, God knows who started it, proceeds to get a real, long one. And everyone is taking a turn. The adults and the children, myself included, at 4. This thing was bigger than me. So my uncle had to get behind me, hold it for me, prop it up for me, just so I could participate and I could do my little thing. Thankfully, he's fine. Nothing happened. Thank God we're all terrible. And at 4, I wasn't really thinking about the repercussions, or like, oh my God, what happens if he got hurt or worse? So I didn't really think about it again until I was, an adult. And I go, hey Mom, I have this crazy memory. And she just starts laughing, and she goes, yep, nope, that happened. I was like, it happened? She goes, yeah, that's all real. I was like, but there were at least 8 adults. There were at least 4 couples. Why didn't anybody stop that? And she just shrugged her shoulders, and I was like, but what if we hit him? And she's like, but we didn't. I was like, yeah, but what if we did? And she's laughing throughout this entire thing. She thinks that this is a super funny story. And in hindsight, we all laugh about it now because, it was well over 20 years ago. And what can you do but laugh? I was like, yeah, but what if we hit him? We're really far from the hospital. And what if we hit him and he wasn't getting back up? And she's like, well, she goes, on the plus side, we lived on 5.5 acres. We had places to put him. But store-bought pesto, that's crazy. So I'm actually surprised I didn't get more comments like this, but yes, sadly, that is a very real, very true story that happened. It's probably the most heinous of them all I can think of. I'm sure there's probably some more back in the old repressed memories that I'll find eventually. If I can't laugh about all of this shit today, I would probably be a very, very sad person. I have had several therapists tell me that I am very normal and very well adjusted given everything that's happened to me, which is baffling to them, baffling to me, to say the least. Honestly, I probably might start posting some more stories about some random shit about my childhood, maybe some funny things that my kids are doing. But to be honest, yeah, I know it sounds kind of sick saying we're laughing about it now, but back in 2001 when I was 4, like, that was very normal to me. It didn't, believe me, that incident only happened once, but trauma like that wasn't something unusual for a lot of us, for one reason or another. My mom, mom, as I love to call her, has had me forever, so you'll understand the dynamic more as I post about how, at her house, it was kind of a revolving door where my cousins would be with us, and then they wouldn't, and then they would, then they wouldn't, because they would be either with her or with their parents. But it makes more sense as to the lack of supervision or the lack of cognitive reasoning in my family. I actually was the Debbie Downer when I got a little bit older of like, well, what if this, or what if that happened? And I actually got labeled as the family snitch, because I would tell my mom everything. I still tell her everything. She used to use me as her little informant, and I knew that. And my family would be like, oh, can't do this, can't say this, Liz is around, she's gonna go snitch on us. No, I won't. I'm not gonna go snitch. I'm not doing that. And then my mom would pick me up, or I'd go find my mom and be like, Mom, you're never gonna guess what so-and-so is doing. You'll never believe this. Or, hey, did you know this was happening? Or she would just ask me about my day, and I would rattle off everything that would happen without the regard of, they told me not to say this. It did kind of bite me on the ass when I became a teenager, because then subconsciously she was like, well, what'd you do? And I would tattle on myself. Nothing crazy, normal teenager shenanigans, but yeah.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Wow, Susie, that's so crazy. It's so crazy. In fact, it reminds me of the time that when I was about 27 years old, I had this feeling, this intuition that the dad I was raised with was not my biological father. And I grew up with one sister. Everybody always said, like, wow, you guys, are you sure you're sisters? Like, you guys look so different. And we always said, yeah, it's genes. Like, our dad is tall, our dad has blonde hair, our dad has blue eyes. My mom is short, my mom has red hair, and my mom has green eyes, so it always worked out. Well, at the age of 27, I just had this weird feeling that, like, Mark, my dad, is not my real dad. And I asked my family about it. I asked I would joke with, it wasn't even a joke, but like I would joke with my mom and be like, hey, when are you going to tell me that my stepdad is my real dad? And she'd be like, haha, where'd that come from? Why would you think that? That's so silly. I can promise you he's not your dad. But kind of beat over the bush kind of thing. Anyways, I finally was fed up with feeling crazy because I'm 27 years old. Why would I then decide, oh, I don't think my dad's my real dad, right? Well, so I went to my grandma's house and said, Grandma, that's it. I feel crazy. No one will tell me the truth. I feel like everybody's beating around the bush. I feel like Mark is not my real dad and no one's telling me the difference. So, or the truth. And so therefore, I'm going to buy a DNA test for me and my sister. It's going to prove that there's something different between the both of us. And then the family, my parents, will have to do some explaining. Well, after that, she brought into the living room where we were sitting a manila envelope. In this manila envelope, there was information and obituaries from my biological father's side. She then said that my mom had a boyfriend in high school, shortly after high school, got pregnant with me. Things just, didn't work out, per se, between them and the lifestyle that they were wanting for each other and for me. So my biological father signed his rights, and then about 2 years-ish later, my dad, who I've always known as Dad, I grew up knowing Dad, he is He adopted me when I was 4. So on my birthday at the age of 4 in 98. My grandma was like kind of sad, and she's like, sorry, but your biological father has passed away. But you know, the light at the end of the tunnel there is that he had another daughter. You have a sister out there in the world. So then I went out to Instagram and looked up this girl, and I was like, hey, do you know who I am? She goes, hey, do you know who I am? And I said, I'm starting to piece things together, but please don't tell anyone. And she goes, oh my God, are you who I think you are? And I said, yes, but please don't tell anyone, because I was terrified she was going to go run off and speak to the whole family before I spoke to her, or like we could get everything straight. We immediately FaceTimed each other, and we looked alike, we sounded alike, and we were just ecstatic. It was immediate connection, immediate love. She always knew about me. Again, I didn't know about anything, you know, but about 1 month after that had happened, we decided to fly her here to where I'm from, Wisconsin, and meet her for the first time, and it was just an amazing moment. But you know what, Susie? Pesto, that's store-bought, that's crazy.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie, that's crazy. About as crazy as my wedding day when me and all of my bridesmaids and the family ladies were getting ready in the salon, and one of my bridesmaids felt a headache coming on. So she looks around the room, she says, does anybody have any Tylenol? My husband's stepmother volunteers herself. She goes, oh yeah, I've got some Tylenol. She's from New Jersey, real thick accent. So she proceeds to give her 2 pills out of her Tylenol bottle that she pulls out of her purse. And a few minutes go by, we're all having a great time, getting ready, drinking mimosas, ready to have an awesome day. I look over, I see the headache bridesmaid kind of, you know, like this, just kind of like not feeling really good. So I just shoot her a little texty text and say, hey, you okay? And she's like, you know, she gave me Tylenol, but I don't think it was Tylenol. She progresses to get a little bit worse throughout the day. Not only is she my bridesmaid, but she's also singing our first dance song. She's semi-professional singer, so she's doing all that, okay? And so as the day goes on, I'm like, are you sure you even want to do this? Do you want to go home? I'm texting the DJ, telling him to get the song on standby, whatever. If she's not feeling good and feeling horrible, she doesn't need to do this, but the bitch powers through. Love her for that. So, no, it's fine. Okay, great. She gets her hair done. She's like this the whole time, you know, and then she gets her makeup done. She is like pushing through. We go to this nearby park to take pictures before we hit the venue, and she's like white as a ghost, fucking vomiting between all of these pictures with me and my bridal party. And I'm like, are you sure you're okay? Like, you're fucking like upchucking throughout this. And she's like, you know, I just need some water. Let me get some food. We get her some water. We get her some food, whatever. Meanwhile, I've texted her then husband, who is in the groom party. He's with my husband. We were traditional. We did not see each other before the wedding. And I'm like, this happened. I don't know what she took. She's fucking like, I'm scared she's going to pass out something, but she's insisting on powering through. And so he's like, okay, oh my God. All right. Well, he kind of just waits for her. He's talking to her on the phone and making sure she's okay. She's like, I'm okay. It's going to be fine. It's fine. So we get to the venue. She gets something to eat. She gets some water. Her then husband approaches my groom's stepmother, and he's like, you need to give me that Tylenol bottle right now. And so she does. She hands it over. She's like, I gave it Tylenol. I don't know what the big deal is. Okay, well, he pours the contents of the bottle onto the table. There's 4 different, like, pills. different shapes, different colors in this bottle labeled Tylenol. And so he asks his then wife, my bridesmaid, he asks her, which one of these did you take? She's like, those little, I don't even fucking know, the little ones, whatever. And she's like, I took 2 of them. And she goes, oh, those are my Percocet. Her Percocet. She took 2 Percocet thinking it was Tylenol. Thank God she hadn't, like, drunk any champagne that morning. I was ordering her around. She was being a great bridesmaid, making me mimosas, whatever. So she's like, the fuck? And so she's having this reaction to this fucking overdosing poison Percocet that my husband's stepmother gave her. But then again, like I said, the bitch powered through. She had to sit down while she sang. She sang beautifully. And as I was saying, my husband and I were traditional. We did not see each other before the wedding. But after we said I do and went to the back of the room, and, you know, my bridesmaid was okay, and thank God she was fine and whatever. First thing I said as a newly married wife to my brand new husband was, because of this little incident that just happened with your stepmom, she will never, ever be responsible or babysit or watch our future children. And we ended up having 2 children, and I made damn sure that she was never alone with them. She was never babysitting them as much as she insisted on it until her dying day. So with all that being said, don't be trying to come into this house with fucking store-bought pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why. I think it's because
Susie, that's crazy. I don't like store-bought pesto either, but you want to know a story that's even crazier? It was the night that my family thought the world was about to end. So I'm 39 now, and this happened when I was 16 years old. One night, it was a foggy night, me, my family, my mom, my dad, my little brother, and my boyfriend, who was visiting at the time, was all in the living room minding their own business, watching TV. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, all the lights in the house start flickering off and on, off and on. The TVs flashing off and on, and we had house phones at the time. The house phones were all going off and on, ringing, ring, 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 ring. Everything lit up like a freaking Christmas tree. And when I tell you lit up, I mean lit up. Well, my dad hopped up. He said, everybody get in a circle right now. Get in a circle. We all got in this huddle. And here I am, 16 years old, and I'm panicking. I'm like, what's going on, Dad? What's going on? And he said, it's okay. It's okay. I love you. I love you. And he was telling my mom, I love you. He was telling my brother, I love you. He was holding on to us and hugging us because he was saying his final goodbye. My mom then realized that my youngest sister was still in the bed asleep. So she had to hurry up, go in there and get her and put her in the circle together. And we was all holding each other. And I'm panicking and I'm looking up at my mom like, what's going on? Because my dad's not telling me. My mom's like, I love you, baby. I love you. I love you. Everything will be fine. This was probably the longest 5 minutes of my freaking life. And my boyfriend, he was in the circle together, but he ran outside to see what the heck was going on. And he ran up my dad's CB pole. My dad was a CBer at the time. On the top of a CD pole, you can see very high up and see what the heck is going on. Well, when we're all in this circle together, I'm crying, I'm panicking. My brother's like, what the heck's going on? My little sister, she's too young to understand what the heck was going on. My mom and dad were saying their final goodbyes. My boyfriend comes running in and says that a car hit a transformer down the street, and that is what caused the big explosion and all the electronics to go crazy. And since it was a foggy night, the light from the explosion lit up everything. It bounced off the fog, which made it look like a nuke had hit. So that is the night that my parents and all of us thought the world was about to end and that we was all going to turn into nothing but ash.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why. I think it's...
That is crazy. But when I was 6 years old, my dad brought this guy home to clean our house. He just went to the street and he met this guy and he said he needed work. So he brought him over to clean our
house. And after a while, this guy asked my dad, "Can you please keep your wife away from me?" And my dad is super trusting. If someone says that they're not a bad guy, he would accept it. Even though he found it really weird, he said, okay. And so when he was done, my mom and dad got dressed. They had to go out to a funeral. And he said, "Can I come with you?" And they were like, "You want to come to a funeral with us?" And he was like, "Yeah." So they take him with and just drop him off somewhere in the street to take a taxi home or something. 2 months later, we saw his picture in the news for being one of the most prolific serial killers in Iran. He actually killed 9 women and children that they know of. And he would actually go to a lot of houses posing as different jobs. He once posed as a German teacher, cleaner, to fix the pipes, whatever, plumber. So he would actually go scouting like this. But he would pick up his victims with his car, posing as taxi.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Absolutely insane. Anyways, I grew up in the 90s and my parents were still married. They owned a long-haul flatbed trucking business. They had a team of drivers that drove all over the U.S. to deliver, I guess, steel products to businesses or whatever you put on a flatbed. Anyhow, whatever comes with flatbed trucking comes with some flatbed weirdos. And I have the weirdest of the weirdo story for you. It is diabolically disturbing. I don't remember the man's name. I was about 7 or 8 years old whenever this happened. All I know is this man was weird. He gave me the ick. He gave my mom bad vibes. Our office was attached to our family home, and so every time this man would come in, my mom would actually make me leave the office because he always wanted me to sit on his lap. I do remember, I can still remember his face. To this day, I can remember that man's face, and he would just stare at you. He would either stare into you or he would stare through you. I can't remember. Oh, it was just icky. I don't remember how long he worked for us, but I just remember that one time he just disappeared, like vanished. His family couldn't find him. His mother couldn't find him. He lived at home with his mother from what I understand. So, and there's your clue number 1 here. And he vanished in the middle of a load. So my dad had to fly out to where the load was, finish the load, then he had to drive the truck back. And business is business. So he put another driver in there and off they went. Time rocked on. Several drivers were in and out of that truck, and every single one of them kept complaining of the smell of that truck. My mom cleaned the truck. I think they had it detailed. Hell, I think at one time they even ripped the carpets out. They did not know where the smell was coming from. Absolutely insane, and I already know what you're thinking, and that ain't it, okay? All right, just keep on. Keep on with this story. So at one point, there was an issue with the air conditioner vents, and they had to start working on the air conditioner. For some reason, and I don't know anything about trucks or vehicles or anything like that, but they had to get inside the air conditioner vents. And inside those air conditioner vents were panties of all sizes, from children to grown women, that had been worn, used and worn. Dozens of them. Yeah. Process that. We don't know what happened to the man. We can only speculate. My dad thinks that he messed with the right one and he was taken care of, but we will never know. I don't remember his name. I did talk to my mom, I think last year about it, and I want to think she said that she sent all the evidence to the FBI in the area where he went missing in the truck. But other than that, that's some damn pesto, huh?
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Wow, Susie, that is so crazy. I bet you thought that was it, right? As far as my trauma is concerned, no. It is not all. So back in 1993, I was 4 years old. This was my mom's first marriage, and she was married to this Jamaican guy. And when she was younger, growing up with her grandparents, she was always taught that you always made your marriage work no matter what. So her husband at that time, he was doing things drug-wise and alcohol-wise that she really wasn't into. And so, she asked him to come off of it, and he wouldn't come off of it. So she decided to go ahead and leave. But because of her morals and her values of what she was taught, she decided to go back. That was a big mistake, because 1993, as me and my sister are sleeping inside of our bed, again, I'm 4 years old at this time. My sister is 6 years old. We ended up going back to his apartment because he was basically trying to convince my mom to stay. We were asleep. It was in the middle of the night, and
him and my mom sat at the dining room table, and they were discussing, you know, pretty much like why they should go ahead and stay together, or, you know, why they should go ahead and separate. And so her husband proceeds at that time to pull out several of them and lay them on the table, along with drugs on the table that he was doing at that time. And so he proceeds to ask her, as he's also drunk, which one of she would use in self-defense if anybody ever broke into her house. And because at this time my mom didn't know anything about, she just pretty much picked one, like saying, you know, this is the one that I would choose. Just so happened before he asked her that, he had emptied out all of the bullets on the table. So all of them were on the table. So once she picked which one that she was going to use in self-defense if anybody ever broke into her house, once she picked that, he picked it up and said, "What would you do if I did this?" And he pulled the trigger, and just so happened all of the bullets were not out of the... And so my mom is sitting like this hand up underneath here, her other hand up underneath here, sitting like that, her elbows up on the table. When he pulled the trigger, thinking that there were no bullets inside of there, there was still one left inside of there. So it goes off, and of course it hits my mom. It goes through her hand, because her hand is like this, and it goes through her hand and goes through her neck and goes down her arm. Of course, me and my sister being inside of our bedroom, we heard everything that happened, so we ran out of the bedroom, and lo and behold, there is my mom sitting in a pool full of her own, on the floor of the dining room. And so the neighbors up underneath us, because we were in an apartment, they also heard it. So the person who lived directly underneath us was one of my mom and her husband's good friends, and he ran upstairs and he also saw what happened. He went ahead and called the ambulance and the police, of course, and we were escorted out of the apartment. But being 4 years old and having to walk past my mom, being in that type of condition and not knowing whether or not I would ever see her again, and her husband being the one who did that. Again, this was not the marriage that I was talking about in my other video. This was her first marriage. So, again, store-bought pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
That is so crazy, Susie. It reminds me of this one time that I was working as a CPS investigator and got a hotline for a child who was in the emergency room with a suspicious injury. Without giving away too much, just Google degloved and use your imagination, or don't, because it's awful. So after 20 minutes of investigating this, I received another hotline for said child's sibling who was at babysitter's house, allegedly covered in bruises. I take law enforcement and we head over to the babysitter's house, where we find this child indeed covered in bruises, all types of bruises. Law enforcement at this time decides to sign the children into state custody so we can continue our investigation and keep the children safe. We take said child, who is currently with us, to the Child Advocacy Center, where they start disclosing tons of abuse that was happening at the hands of their father. Not only that, but they also disclosed that they had been adopted by this family in a different state. Before they had been adopted, they were in foster care with this family, and they had been through other foster families that had been in their area. Once CPS in that state caught on, they moved all of the children to said state that they were in now. Once they were in this state, the older children started showing signs of abuse and, trauma, so they start signing them into foster care and, basically to get rid of them and hush them up. And this child was nervous that they were just going to end up never being able to see their siblings again. We tell said child that, we will do our best to make sure that they still get to see their siblings, and they disclosed that they had a case manager who should have been coming out to their house every month and had not been doing sibling visits or whatever. When we let the supervisors know that this case manager should have at least seen some signs of abuse on this child, it was then covered up and made to look like said case worker was going out and seeing the family. Law enforcement talked to the father, who ended up admitting to all of the abuse that he had been causing to said child, although did not disclose what happened to first child, who was in the emergency room. He ended up being charged with 17 counts of child abuse, but posted bail bond, and is currently walking free until his trial. So, you know, shortly after this, I ended up resigning from my position, as I was told to stop investigating because there was nothing that I could do. But yeah, Pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
That is bonkers, Susie. It reminds me of this one time whenever I gave birth to my daughter. Mind you, I was completely unprepared. I didn't take the birthing classes. I didn't listen to anything that anybody said about that. I needed to be more prepared, pretty much. So I had high fluid. I had to be induced. I went in on Sunday night at 8 o'clock, and by 2 o'clock on Monday, I had a baby. But the trauma in between is the story. So it started normal. They give you the stuff that softens your cervix, the little pills they put in you. It's supposed to soften your cervix, and then once it's soft enough, they can start to give you the Pitocin, which dilates you. I don't know how this works, but that's how it works. So they start giving me, I get soft enough that they can start giving me the Pitocin. They give me the Pitocin. I got, in like 3 hours, I only dilated like 1 centimeter, so I was at like a 3. Went from a 2 to a 3. I was at 2 for months, but went to a 2 to a 3, and I was feeling it by then, so I was like, okay, can I get my epidural? She's like, yeah, you can get it, but when you get it earlier, the chances of it wearing off are higher, like toward the end, so you'd feel everything. And I'm like, okay, like everybody I've talked to, it's fine, like it'll last. So I get it at a 3. Terrible pain, terrible. I get it at a 3, and it only does one side of me. So I can feel my left side contracting, terrible, horrible pain. I can feel the left side, I can't feel the right side's numb. So eventually I get to where I can feel everything. So all the contractions, everything. So I'm like, hey, can I get another one? And they're like, another epidural? And I'm like, yes. So she says, if you can get a second one. She's like, but if you get the second one, the chances of you feeling everything go up. And I'm like, okay, well, how often does that happen? And she's like, oh, well, I've been here 10 years and it's only happened a handful of times. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, like, those chances are good. I was the handful. So, I feel everything. I'm starting to feel, I can feel all the contractions. There's nothing else they can do. They've already given me 2 epidurals. They're telling me it's time to push. So I start pushing, and now when I tell y'all that the pain is torture pain, it's like torture chamber pain, it's worse than that. Anyways, so I start pushing, and I can feel her head starting to come out, and it's there, it's in the birth canal, I can feel it. And the pain is so bad, and as I'm pushing, I start to see stars. And every time I tell the story, I start to get like fucking weird because trauma and shit, but you know. So I started to see stars, and I told my doctor, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna pass out. And she's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, she's like, you can do this. And I'm like, okay. And I feel a contraction come, I take a deep breath, and I push, and when I push, everything goes black, and I wake up to hearing people screaming my name. Trying to process the pain, the fact that I was birthing a baby, and the fact that I just passed out while I was delivering a baby was a lot. So she starts screaming at me, asking me if I've ever had a seizure before. I say no. She says, have you ever passed out before? I say, yeah. She said, did it feel like that? And I was like, kinda. In the process of me, like, pretty much in and out of it, she starts cutting me without telling me. So she cuts me, and I'm, ow, I can feel that. And she's, I know you can. And she keeps cutting me. I can feel every bit of this. She cuts me straight down, okay? And pulls my baby out. Weirdest feeling in the world. I don't know if y'all have ever felt that. It's weird. It's so weird. She's fine. She's screaming, pissed. As soon as she comes out, she brings her over to the side, like where you weigh the baby and all that good stuff. And so I'm more focused. I'm so traumatized at this point. I'm looking over at her and I'm like, she's okay. Like, she's okay. She's screaming. She's fine. In the process of me focusing on her, I'm bleeding out. So I'm bleeding out. She gives me a shot, shoves some pills somewhere. She's like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I have to give you this shot. You won't stop bleeding. She gives me the shot. I can feel myself like dying. Like, I can feel it. And euphoria, by the way, if you ever wondered what it felt like. And so she starts sewing me up before I'm even numb. She gave me a shot to numb me too. Starts sewing me up before I'm even numb, and I'm shaking. I'm in shock, completely in shock. I didn't know that this is what I was in for at all. They put the baby on my chest. They put my dollar on my chest, and my baby daddy leaves the room. He's like, I'll be right back. And I'm like, okay. He goes out to tell my mom and my sister that right after I told her that I was going to pass out, that I started kicking them. I started kicking the doctors and the nurses. And they were like, what are you doing? And as they're doing that, they look up at me and my eyes are rolling in the back of my head. And I am like, literally, I'm just not there. And apparently I like blank out for like a good 10 seconds. And then I come to. And I don't know what happened. I don't know if I had a seizure. I don't know if I passed out. But the trauma of it, way crazier than store-bought pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Oh, Susie, what are we going to do with you? So in my early 20s, I was addicted to heroin, and then I got off heroin, and a few years later, many of my family members died. So at one point, my mom and I had a lot of stuff to go through and get rid of and see what we needed to scan on the computer. So one night at 3 a.m., I worked third shift, but I was scanning documents onto the computer, and I found a document that had information on a donor. And I had no idea what that meant. Turns out it was a sperm donor that was used to conceive me. Now, I was 25 years old at the time and had no idea about any of this, and my mom was asleep, so all I had in front of me was paperwork on this random guy who was apparently my father. At the beginning, there were so many emotions, but about 3-4 months later, I finally had results from a DNA test I took, and turns out I had about 15 siblings. And since then, that number has grown to 77 siblings. There's new ones every year around January because everybody gets new DNA tests for Christmas. Whenever Amazon has a sale on DNA tests for Prime Day or whatever, we have an influx of siblings that just randomly One of my sisters lives 20 minutes away from me. I have 2 sisters that went to high school together. They didn't know they were siblings. Many of them grew up right down the street from one another. Could have dated, could have been in each other's families in another way. But yeah, I have 77 siblings. So far, because there could be up to 150 of us, as was told to us by our donor, who has actually been very open about things, and that's not something that's common in the donor-conceived community. But we have gotten quite a lot of answers from him. Now, I have met 13 in person. I've talked to pretty much all of them at one point or another, and really it's become one of the most positive things in my life. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but this video is getting pretty long as it is. But yeah, Susie, I'm with.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie babes, that's unhinged. Anyway, not quite as unhinged as store-bought pesto. However,
I had a friend, a best friend at the time, who called me up one day. We were 16. She said, "Hey, I got a guy here. He has a car. Let's party tonight." And I wasn't like much of a partier, but I was up to it for that day. And turns out it was a guy I knew that I was semi-dating like the year before, but never really went anywhere. So they pick me up, and she has another guy with her, so it's 2 guys, 2 girls. And we drive off to like a wooded area near my house, like a park wooded area near my house, which is super safe. So we get to the park or the woods. It's nighttime, I should mention that. And my friend and this guy that I had never met, but apparently she knew, jump out and go off into the woods somewhere. I'm left with my sort of ex-boyfriend that never went anywhere, but we're still on good terms. I don't know. And he tries to kiss me, of course, and I'm not into it because no. And so then he skips right to, "Oh, I have condoms." Bro, I won't even kiss you. Like, what are you thinking? I say nicely, like, yeah, I'm not really into that. Like, maybe we could just talk. I mean, he gets enraged. I mean, terrifyingly enraged. Jumps out of his car, okay, goes to find my friend and the guy, whatever they're doing, well, and comes back and says, "You get out of the front seat, you get in the back seat." And I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I'm in between my friend and this other guy, and he takes off, okay, and we're all in the back seat. He takes off and starts driving like 100 miles an hour, like back towards my friend's house, not even my house. He won't drive me home. He's driving her home. And throughout, periodically, the car ride, he is getting out at the red lights and trying to go back to the back seat and pull me out of the car, like into traffic. And my friend and this other guy are like, "No, let's not do this." And they're holding on to me, like they're holding on to me. Anyway, we get back to my friend's house, and I run to the door. She and I run to the door. She opens it. We all go in. And then he charges in, starts calling me names, and I'm calling him names because I was a little mouthy then, like, you know, not in the way he wanted me to be mouthy. This dude chased me around her house wanting to beat me up. I had to fend him off while my friend and this other dude did nothing. In their defense, I think they were in shock. I'm throwing living room chairs or dining room chairs at him. I took a phone, it was the 90s, so I took a phone with the cord and used it like a mace, as if I was some medieval, you know, knight. I don't know if knights use mace. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm still in shock. It was like 30 years ago, almost, and it's still in shock, but I'm not done. I'm not done, Susie. So I run up to my friend's room, lock the door, okay? And I hear some talking downstairs and the door slams. So I'm like, I guess he's gone. I go down there, they're all gone. So I'm a little worried. About an hour later, my friend comes back. I said, "Where were you?" She was like, "Oh, we were just all smoking weed." But it doesn't even end there. Yes, my best friend went and smoked weed with a guy who wanted to beat me up for not wanting to hook up with him. But that's not where it ends, Susie. 7 years later, I did college a little late. I'm in a community college class for sex and gender. And one of the things we're talking about is violence against women. And one of my classmates walks up and does a talk about how she had been assayed. And she's older than us, or me at least. So she is definitely older than this guy that tried to beat me up. Put a pin in that, just remember that. She goes on and on. She starts describing what happened. She was a driver, and this is before Uber, this is purely taxi. And she picked up this well-known guy in the town, and as they're driving, he forces her to stop. I forget how. I don't think he had a gun or anything like that, but he was a big guy. Forces her to stop and says her in her own cab. And she's describing him. She's telling us the town it is, and it clicks. This is the same guy. This is the same guy who tried to beat me up 6-7 years earlier. Okay. So I raised my hand because she had already used some familiar names but not his, and I said, did he have a brother named so-and-so? Did he live out here? Same guy. Same exact guy. The guy who tried to beat me up for not sleeping with him or even kissing him actually essayed someone probably 5 to 10 years older than us in her own taxi cab around the same time. After class, I approached her and I'm like, did you ever get justice? And she said no. But what did happen, Susie, is in that same truck that he picked us up in, that he was going 100 miles an hour in, towards my friend's house, he crashed it with 3 other people in that truck, and they all died. Maybe like 2 or 3 years after the incident with me. So I'm guessing 2 or 3 years after the incident with her. Yeah, I think he wrapped his car around a tree, and he died and took 3 other people with him. I'm gonna leave it there. But that store-bought pesto, man,